Welcome, everyone, to the Sideline Report. I'm Marvin Jackson. The Commanders get a big victory last weekend over the Cowboys with nothing on the line, but they came through with a big game. But first, I'd like to introduce all my guests. Mike Richman is here, the old Redskin historian. I don't know what you are. Are you the Commanders historian too, Mike?
Not yet, but David and I were discussing this the other day. We decided on the Washington team historian.
Okay.
That would be appropriate right now. Pretty soon to be the George Allen biographer.
All right.
When my book comes out on George Allen.
All right. And, well, we might as well mention that now. Your book comes out when?
Supposed to hit the shelves on October 1st of this year, and full-fledged biography on George Allen, the Hall of Fame NFL coach who was here in D.C. from 71 through 77, but left a legacy of much more than just coaching the Redskins. So it was with the L.A. Rams, the fearsome foursome in the 60s, and then he was with the President's Council of Physical Fitness in the 80s, and USFL. He was a great coach there. So just a really fascinating figure, and I was very happy to be able to dive into this project.
We're going to talk more about the folks that were playing for him, like Sonny Jurgensen, his legacy a little bit later in the show. But I loved how he always said, the future is now. And now we're going to introduce Barry Barnes. He is with us. Thanks for joining us, Barry.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. And Lou Holder and Donna Hopkins, always here with me. So let's talk about this, the game. I mean, the breaking news. We got some breaking news that just hit right now as we tape, and it's Scott Turner was fired by the Commanders. And Lou and Donna, what do you guys have to say about that? Because I know you all have talked about him not being the guy over the last couple of years.
Yeah, Marvin, not even the last couple of years. I didn't think that well, let me just say this. You hate to see anybody lose their job. But from day one, back when Coach Rivera hired Scott Turner, who had never been an offensive coordinator, really, and to come into a situation like Washington, the way this team was already built, you did not want someone that was learning on the job. You wanted someone that was already up and running. And Coach Rivera was asked today about, how Scott performed, and he said that he did his job, but really he did not do his job diligently. When you're ranked 20th in the NFL, and then you're ranked 21st in passing, 24th in scoring, and that was not just this year, but he was in the bottom of the tier offensively. Now to Scott Turner's, he had 8 quarterbacks to his defense. If you had one, he had 8 different quarterbacks, but it wasn't even about the quarterbacks that he had. It was his play calling. When you talk to the fans, when you talk to other people with personnel in other teams, they pretty much said they knew what Scott Turner was going to do week in and week out. So it wasn't so much, you would have loved to have had a great quarterback in here, but even with the quarterback situation, it was his play calling. In the end, I believe that they had to make this change if they wanted to go forward in making the necessary changes so that we won't be talking about not being in the playoffs come next year. And that's just one change that needed to be made coaching wise.
Yeah. And that offensive line, Donna, was also a detriment to Scott Turner. But at the end of the day, Ron Rivera brought in Scott Turner. So Ron Rivera managed Scott Turner. So the blame isn't all on Scott Turner, but that offense was not consistent. You had too many weapons around that field. And you could hear it from Brian Robinson. You could hear it from Logan Thomas. You could hear from so many, just the inflection in their voices where they were just frustrated. Something had to be done. But now that offensive coordinator is gone, now the light is on a lot more, because going into the year, Marvin, we both, Don and I were both harping on it, that the offensive and the defensive coordinators were going to be in our sights, looking to see what they were going to do with that talent, right? As much as some of Jack Del Rio's stuff frustrated us, at the end of the day, that defense performed at the level that was commensurate with all the stars that they had. This offense, because look, you can sit there and also say, Kyle Shanahan didn't have a huge quarterback, but he keeps things going, right? We've all seen one of the best to ever do it, and Joe Jackson Gibbs had different quarterbacks. It's all the way that you play call, and like Donna said, the play calling with that offensive coordinator was suspect at best.
I wonder if some of the players also in their exit interviews yesterday might have expressed their displeasure with some of the play calling, and
they didn't need to say it yesterday. They were saying it for weeks. They were saying it after the Giants game. They were saying it after the Cleveland game. That Cleveland game, oh my goodness, that Cleveland game alone, right, was the end for Scott Turner. Dallas didn't even matter at that point. That Cleveland game, when you needed a win, Carson Wentz, Sam Howell, Taylor Heineke, Donna Hopkins, Lou Holder, Mike Richman. I mean, Bonds, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You had what you needed there, and Cleveland knew what Washington was going to do on offense. That's all you needed to know.
Hey, Lou, and then let me jump in here right quick. Ron Rivera said at the beginning of the season that he would be based on the win and losses and everything. When he was asked in the exit last interviews with him and Martin Mayhew, they asked him, how would you assess yourself as far as this year, as far as the wins and the losses? And he said that it takes more than just winning and losing the record, as far as it takes a lot more as far as looking at that. But at the beginning of the season, he said that he would be judged on the W's and the L's. So that's almost like contradicting himself as far as his assessment of himself. I already think that they knew that Scott Turner was going to be fired, even at that moment, because they said that they were assessing everybody a few hours later, and you're fired. That decision was already made.
Yeah, but again, if he was a sacrificial lamb, right? Okay, guys, if he was a sacrificial lamb, now you got uncertainty with ownership, and you have maybe a head coach that's a lame duck head coach. What offensive coordinator are they going to find that's going to come in here, right, with only 1 year maybe to prove something, and then you'll be out again? It's going to be very, very interesting now that the move has actually been made. It's going to be very interesting to find out who is going to take that job with no ownership stability, coaching stability. You don't have any of that. And quarterback, you don't have any of that either.
some good news, and that is the big victory over Dallas.
Well, Marvin, I have to start off by saying it's always great to get a win over your most hated rival over the years, the Dallas Cowboys. But let's just get that out of the way right now, okay? The game meant nothing to Washington. I mean, already out of the playoffs, and it's another season. It's another season of mediocrity. I mean, 8-1. This is, we've seen this dance before. This has been happening for the past 3 decades since Joe Gibbs left for the first time. Just this team, they've been to the playoffs 6 times over that 30-year period. It's just, we've got to see more out of this squad where they're going to make that jump into the playoffs, and they're going to make a playoff run. And of course, they had the letdown toward the end of this season. Couldn't put it all together when they needed to. So again, we're looking ahead. It's a full contemplation in the offseason about which direction we're going in. And I mean, Sam Howell, certainly he earned himself a look heading into training camp next summer. I mean, 11 of 19, 180 yards, and that gorgeous 52-yard pass that he threw to McLaurin. I mean, I don't think Heineke could have made that throw. Wentz maybe, but that was just a beautiful throw. And I mean, certainly he deserves attention next season. It's, for a possible starting role in 2023.
Hey, Mike, I disagree with you. Because I think that game meant everything, because as the players said, they were able to finish on a strong note. And then also, Coach Rivera had a lot of young players that played in that game, and he got to see a lot from them, and they played a solid game. So I don't take this game light. I think that this game was a must win for them, and for so many other reasons. We know that they weren't going into the playoffs or anything like that. But to me, winning a game like that to go into the next season to build on, to me, was very important.
Well, that of course is important, Donna. I mean, it's an audition for for a number of players, including Howell and the guys who really haven't had the opportunity to show themselves throughout the season. Yes, certainly that is correct. But it's just from, in the context I'm putting it in, it's just another game where it meant nothing record-wise or playoff-wise at the end of the season for the Washington team. And again, they're going into the offseason. They're not going to be, competing for, making a Super Bowl run or anything like that. So that is redundant. We've seen this so many times over the years. That's where I was coming from in terms of. No,
I knew where you were coming from, but I wanted to lay that out because they could have laid an egg against Dallas in that game and had a miserable game, being that they had a lot of rookie players in there. So I like the way that they played in the end going into next season and building on that.
Let me ask Donna if she'll at least agree with me. The Washington team, they left 14 points on the field in the first half. I don't think they took advantage of everything that Dallas gave them. Sorry.
No, I agree with you. They left it on there, but at the end, a 26-6 win is a win, and they did a lot of things.
I don't think Dallas first string really wanted to play that day.
They had everything going for them.
That was Dak's worst game of the year.
Yeah.
That's the point that
it was pathetic.
Because clearly the Cowboys were not in that A game in that game. And
they should have been.
Any win in the NFL is always important because all the sacrifice that come in through the offseason, leading up to the week, coming up to the game, it's always important to have a win. So it's always important. You never look over a win in NFL. But I think with the Washington Commanders, where they are now, is something that they have been wanting to be at for a number of years. Have talent on both sides of the ball. They finally had the talent there. Now just go and see what they're going to do in 2003 for what coaching staff, what coaching changes they may make. Just hopefully that whatever quarterback they decide to go with, I know Heineke supposed to be a free agent, or if it's going to be Sam, whoever they bring in, they need to have a good relationship with the coach and quarterback. If you have a good relationship with coach and quarterback where these guys can be on the same page and know how to actually handle situations, help the quarterback to know how to handle the game mentally on and off the field, and these guys come together and work closely together, I think that's where you have your best chemistry, and then that eventually will fold out to the team. They have all the pieces on both sides of the ball. Now they just got to make sure they have the right coaching staff that's going to put into the quarterback so these guys will be able to move forward, because Washington, they like right there to really become a legitimate playoff team.
All right, some good news from Bad News Barnes right there.
It won't last, though.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to get you guys each to say what you think as far as the Heineke and Howell situation. We know both those guys will probably be back, but they may not be the featured guy.
Heineke's not coming. With Scott Turner gone, Heineke, you can basically, because the only reason Heineke was here because he knew Scott Turner's offense. So I think the news of Scott Turner being fired can basically cement the fact that Taylor Heineke is not going to be here. I just don't see it.
I would hope Heineke comes back at least as a backup.
He can be a backup somewhere else, Mike.
I think you got to move on from him, Mike, because I'm like
he can be a backup somewhere else. If you're really trying to change now, the only person that's on the roster now that really matters at this point is the person that was not too big. That moment was not too big for him. And that's the only really good news that came out of that game, besides what Donna was saying, is that the game was not too big for Sam Howell, right? At that point, you don't go back to having Heineke replace Howell to go on a run, and then we're back in the same way. You got to move on from number 4 and number 11 and just keep 14 and bring in a Carr or someone else. But you got to move on from Heineke. We've seen it.
At the same time, they can't be looking at Howell as the bona fide starter heading into next season.
We didn't say that. No one said that.
They need. I
just said that with Turner being fired, that means that the person that was supposed to be able to run Turner's offense is now gone as well.
You likely have that's a valid point. I'll give you that, yes.
Mike, they shouldn't look at Howard as being the starting quarterback, because to me, they still need a veteran in here, but he's going to get some consideration the way he plays. So they found out a little bit more, not just in that game, because at the beginning of training camp, we were saying that Howard was the better quarterback to play in all of training camp than Heineke and Carson Wentz. So to me, they can start there with Howard as far as because he's on the contract. But I'm like, Lou, we got to move on past Taylor Heineke. I love him and everything, but you've got to build that position to take you to the next level. And he's not going to take them to the next level.
All right, we're going to have to move on to our next segment.